from like a family of preachers, and I kind of, my dad broke the mold, and then I continued to break the mold. So I grew up a lot around preachers, and I guess some of it gets into the work.
No one would ever imagine the deep tragedy Chris Rock has carried throughout his life. Always cracking jokes and putting smiles on others' faces, few realize he grew up surrounded by darkness, heartbreak, and trauma that left invisible scars on his soul. For someone who endured so much bitterness, how did Chris manage to turn his silent suffering into success? And what pain still lingers behind his forced laughter? Join us as we uncover the heartbreaking truth behind the tragedy of Chris Rock. A childhood shaped by trauma. Growing up, Chris Rock saw his father, Julius Rock, as his greatest hero. Julius worked tirelessly as a truck driver, and Chris admired his father's discipline. He reportedly dreamed of one day becoming just like him, driving trucks down long highways and living with the same sense of dignity his father carried. However, everything changed in 1988 when Julius passed away. Chris was still young at the time and was deeply affected by the loss. He was once quoted saying that when a man's father dies, he realizes he is truly alone, a feeling that is accompanied by a painful emptiness and a new way of seeing life. It was said that the grief made him question his purpose, yet from that sorrow came a strange kind of wisdom. In a later interview with Oprah Winfrey, Chris reportedly pondered on how losing his father had changed his outlook. The experience taught him not to take life too seriously, admitting that after his father's death, he came to believe that everything except death eventually works itself out. This realization became a quiet philosophy he carried through the years, shaping his sense of resilience. The pain didn't disappear, but he learned that time had the power to soften it. Chris carried many of his father's lessons into adulthood. Julius, remembered as strict but fair, had kept his son out of trouble by teaching him discipline and self-respect. Chris once mentioned that his father's guidance kept him from falling in with the wrong crowd. While he wasn't a criminal, his father made sure he surrounded himself with the right people. Above all, Julius was known to value discipline. He often told his children that punctuality was a sign of respect for oneself and for others. Chris later joked that his father didn't believe in being early because, to Julius, being early was the only time that mattered. Those who worked with Chris have definitely noticed how that same principle shaped his career. His reliability, focus, and professionalism all traced back to the lessons his father instilled in him. Yet, outside his home, Chris's childhood was anything but peaceful. He endured bullying that left lasting emotional scars. He described how his school years were filled with torment. Half the bullying came because of his small size, and the other half because of his race. This painful combination made school life unbearable, and he often felt isolated and unsafe. In a 2020 conversation on The Howard Stern Show, he reportedly spoke openly about the abuse he endured. He described it as a horrible existence, comparing it to the suffering of Tim Robbins' character in The Shawshank Redemption. Some of what he experienced, he admitted, crossed dark boundaries. Though he said he had not been violated sexually, he described it as something rapish, a haunting phrase that revealed the trauma he had carried for years. Eventually, the constant bullying became too much, and he dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, not out of weakness, but as an act of survival. Comedy soon became his escape. Through humor, Chris found a way to reclaim his voice and turn pain into purpose.
Here you go, Shaq. Go buy yourself a bouncing car. Bling, bling!
Years later, while filming a movie, he reportedly recognized one of his former bullies on the crew. Instead of anger, Chris greeted him calmly and continued his work. Later, he joked that the moment felt like when Bugs Bunny kissed Elmer Fudd just to annoy him.
You wouldn't be that screwy wabbit, would you? Could be.
A symbol of victory without revenge. But while time made the trauma that he endured from his bullies become bearable, experiencing a traumatic experience a second time tends to bring back long-forgotten memories. What tragic event brought back memories that Chris had fought to move on from? The pain of loss. While the death of his father had left him with scars that he learned to live with, the death of his close friend, fellow comedian Chris Farley, who passed away from a drug overdose in 1997, broke him beyond repair. Their friendship began during their early days on Saturday Night Live.
Welcome to I'm Chillin', the showsy with the housies.
When they shared countless memories and moments. In 2021, Chris reflected on the friendship he once shared with Farley. He mentioned that, while looking at an old photograph of them together, he realized it might have been one of the last times they were seen together. Being around someone struggling with addiction was emotionally draining. As Farley's addiction grew worse, anything that was not related to the drug began to feel like a burden to him. Chris described one particular visit to Farley's apartment that left him with an uneasy feeling. After leaving, he said he looked back through the window and somehow knew it would be the last time he would ever see his friend alive. That moment stayed with him for many years. Even though Farley's death was painful, Chris spoke fondly of their bond and the fun they shared. He remembered how he, Farley, Adam Sandler, and David Spade shared an office at SNL, jokingly calling it a dorm because of their constant laughter and chaos. He added that he still loved those friends and cherished what they all shared during those years. Adam Sandler also spoke about visiting their old SNL office on Late Night with Seth Meyers in 2019. He said he stood by Farley's old desk and thought of all the wild and funny moments they had experienced there.
Sounds good, right? Until that gets here. And have some cereal.
For Chris, such memories were both joyful and sad, proof of how laughter and loss often lived side by side in his life. Years later, Chris faced another difficult chapter when his marriage ended. To many, he and his wife, Malak Compton Rock, appeared to have a happy family. They had been married for almost 2 decades and shared 2 daughters. However, in 2014, he filed for divorce, a decision that surprised fans and friends alike. Later, Chris admitted that he had been unfaithful during the marriage. During one of his comedy shows, he said he had made serious mistakes and described himself in a degrading manner. Reports later revealed that he had confessed to having several affairs, and 2 of the women involved were public figures. His honesty about his failures showed that he was willing to take responsibility for what had happened. Their divorce was finalized in 2016. A few years later, during an interview on The Tonight Show in 2021, Chris joked about how costly the separation had been. He had said that it was so bad that he even recommended his ex-wife's divorce lawyer to others, a remark that mixed humor with painful truth. He also shared that the hardest part of the entire process was not losing money, but going through the custody hearings for his daughters. During a show with Dave Chappelle in New Orleans, Chris admitted that those hearings were the most emotionally draining part of his life. Despite everything, he had chosen to stay close to his daughters. Many of his friends had assumed that after the divorce, he had moved far away, but he explained that he had bought a house just around the corner from them, so he could always be near. Having been through several challenges in his life, it seemed life wasn't about to cut him some slack, or did it? The tragedy never ends. In 2021, it was reported that Chris Rock had contracted COVID-19. He became ill in September that year, just when public life was reopening and he was returning to stand-up comedy. Shortly after his diagnosis, he had tweeted that he had COVID and warned people not to take it lightly, urging them to get vaccinated. Chris had always been vocal about vaccination. During a May 2021 interview on Live with Kelly and Ryan,
doing more than just comedy as an actor?
I remember when I was on the show,
he humorously mentioned that he had been just getting vaccines every day. When Gayle King asked if he was worried about the vaccine, he joked that he didn't even know what was in Tylenol, but only cared that it worked. After recovering, Chris shared his experience during a surprise stand-up set at the Blue Note Jazz Club, joking that having COVID was almost as difficult as being black, though he admitted it was something everyone wanted to avoid. Around the same period, Chris also faced personal challenges when his mother, Rose Rock, was diagnosed with breast cancer nearly 3 decades after his father's death. In an interview with Rolling Stone in 2017, he revealed that he had been her caretaker and feared she might not survive. He confessed that some days he prayed she would pass while his daughters were with their mother, as he didn't want them to witness her suffering. Fortunately, Rose recovered. In a 2012 video interview with WPDE ABC 15, Rose had playfully said that her claim to fame was being Chris Rock's mother, though she insisted she was much more than that. She also spoke about the struggles of raising her children alone after Julius Rock's death, explaining that she worked, taught, and cared for her large family, while also fostering other children. Despite the challenges, she said she had kept the same values she and her late husband shared, showing resilience and strength, qualities clearly passed down to her son. Did all the past traumatic experiences he had to endure have any lasting negative impact on his mental health? Chris Rock's battle for healing. In 2020, Chris revealed to The Hollywood Reporter that therapy had become a major part of his life. He had been diagnosed with a nonverbal learning disorder, which helped him understand why he often struggled with emotional expression. Realizing he still carried heavy baggage from his childhood, he decided it was time to face his past. In an interview, he explained that success hadn't erased his trauma, so therapy became a way to revisit his early experiences and heal old wounds. In his sessions, Chris began confronting the painful memories of his younger years, including the intense bullying he had endured. But being a comedian, he still found a way to sprinkle humor into his honesty. He once joked that he wished someone had only sent him a mean text when he was a kid, instead of physically hurting him, saying that back then, those kids were trying to kill him. When it came to his mental well-being, Chris admitted that he was fully committed. During a conversation with Gayle King in 2020, he explained that therapy had become even more important to him after the COVID-19 pandemic began. He said that he had thrown himself into it completely and was still continuing the process. For him, healing was about being honest with himself and staying consistent. He believed that real progress came through honesty and hard work, noting that people could change if they truly wanted to. Chris's openness about therapy showed a side of him that the public rarely saw, a man determined to understand himself and grow beyond the pain that once held him back. He made it clear that behind the jokes and the fame was someone willing to put in the time to heal. But while Chris worked quietly on his mental health, another storm brewed in the public eye: the drama between him and Will Smith. What most people saw as a single shocking moment at the 2022 Oscars had actually been years in the making. The connection between the two men went back decades. In 1995, Chris appeared as a guest on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
We're not finished talking yet.
Maurice, this is my cousin.
Although we never really did a background.
Sharing the screen with Will Smith. Later, he even worked alongside Will's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, in the Madagascar movies. Their paths crossed often, but Chris's humor sometimes created tension. During an appearance on The David Letterman Show, Chris joked that he had always felt like he was competing with Will, saying that Will had taken movie roles from him, and now even his kids were taking parts from Chris's children. It was meant as humor, but it hinted at a subtle rivalry. Over the years, Chris also made jokes about Jada that drew attention. Back in 1997, on The Chris Rock Show, he teased her in a lighthearted segment. Then, at the 2016 Oscars, he joked about her decision to boycott the event, saying she wasn't invited or nominated in the first place. The couple didn't react strongly at the time, but it quietly added to the tension. Everything reached its breaking point at the 2022 Academy Awards when Chris made a joke about Jada's shaved head. What came next shocked the world. Will Smith walked onto the stage and slapped him.
Oh, wow! Wow!
The moment instantly became one of the most talked about events in television history. Since then, Will Smith has publicly apologized, but Chris has said he isn't ready to discuss what happened in full. The incident left a lasting impact on both men. Will Smith's Best Actor win faded into the background, replaced by endless debate, outrage, and analysis. But as the noise grew, another conversation began to surface, one about Chris's nonverbal learning disorder, or NVLD. After the incident, people started looking more closely at how the comedian processes the world around him. According to the NVLD Project, individuals with this neurological condition struggle with interpreting social cues and spatial awareness. They might misread facial expressions, tone or body language, challenges that can make social interactions difficult or confusing. When this information resurfaced, many began to see the slap, and Chris's reaction to it in a more complex light. In the days following the Oscars, online searches for NVLD surged. Social media filled with posts from people sharing information about the condition and expressing newfound empathy for Chris. Actress and producer Austin Highsmith-Garces tweeted that she'd just learned about Chris's diagnosis, describing NVLD as similar to Asperger's syndrome. Legal analyst Amy Dash added that the moment could help raise awareness about the disorder, while showrunner Holly Sorensen explained that NVLD affects one's ability to read social cues and understand what's appropriate in certain situations. For Chris, this revelation wasn't new. He had spoken openly about his diagnosis years earlier, hoping to shed light on his experiences. In a 2020 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he revealed that therapy helped him understand the challenges he'd faced all his life. He admitted that for years, he blamed fame whenever people reacted to him negatively. When one scandal or controversy that is linked with Chris Rock dies down, best believe another is on the horizon. This time, it was a controversy surrounding the number of procedures he had undergone. Let's unravel these revelations. The constant need for change. Over the years, fans have questioned the changes in Chris's looks. After his return to Saturday Night Live, viewers couldn't resist commenting on his looks, wondering aloud if the comedian might have turned to cosmetic surgery. While many admired his performance, others focused less on his jokes and more on the fine details of his face, sparking endless online discussions.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right?
Social media quickly became the stage for speculation. Some users joked about fillers and facelifts, while others defended him, saying age or lighting could easily explain any perceived changes. One fan reminded others that Chris would soon turn 60, a natural reason for his appearance to evolve. Others argued that the bright SNL stage lights could make anyone look different. Despite the debate, no solid evidence supported the claims about the surgery. Though Chris Rock has never confirmed undergoing any cosmetic procedure, he once joked in 2018 that he'd had a lot of plastic surgery and even bragged about having the tightest ears in the business. Of course, knowing Chris's playful nature, most people understood it as humor rather than confession. Still, the remark resurfaced years later, fueling rumors once again. The conversation about Chris's looks has also opened a wider discussion about men and cosmetic surgery. Once seen as a women-only choice, more men are now turning to procedures for self-improvement and confidence. Treatments like blepharoplasty, gynecomastia correction, and hair transplants have become especially common, and cities like Dubai have emerged as hubs for such transformations. Experts have also suggested that lighting may have played a role in how Chris looked during SNL. Stage lighting, especially in high-definition broadcasts, can exaggerate facial shadows and fine lines, making subtle features appear more pronounced. Interestingly, when Chris appeared on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon days earlier, he looked almost the same as usual, adding weight to the argument that perception, not surgery, might be behind the rumors. Still, while people debated his looks under the harsh studio lights, others wondered if the real story wasn't about appearance at all, but about how easily public focus shifts from talent to image. After all, was the conversation about his face overshadowing what truly mattered, his fearless voice and the sharp comedy that made him unforgettable? The depth of a personality. It was often said that Chris Rock's comedy wasn't meant for the faint-hearted. His jokes came without filters or sugarcoating, touching on raw subjects like race, class, and everyday injustices that most people preferred to ignore. Those who watched him perform often felt they were being both entertained and challenged. His humor had the strange power to make people laugh and think at the same time. turning stand-up comedy into a mirror that reflected society's uncomfortable truths. Chris had a way of blending laughter with discomfort, forcing audiences to confront the world as it was rather than how they wished it to be. Observers often described his stage presence as a moral X-ray, scanning through the layers of polite manners and exposing the hypocrisy underneath. He didn't aim merely to amuse, he wanted to provoke thought. Some called him fearless, others thought him too daring, but everyone agreed he had something important to say. His jokes weren't delivered just to fill silence, they carried meaning. He was said to treat every show as a lesson in honesty, peeling back society's mask with wit and precision. To him, laughter was never the final destination. It was a doorway to reflection. Those close to his career remembered that his early days were far from glamorous. In the 1980s, he performed in small, dimly lit New York clubs like Comic Strip Live and Catch a Rising Star.
I just gave him $5. Now, check this out. I had about 300 in my pocket.
These were smoky, crowded rooms where new comedians fought for attention and respect. Chris Rock, still young and restless, worked tirelessly night after night, often performing for audiences that were tough to impress. The floors were sticky with spilled beer, and the spotlight barely lit the stage, but that was where he sharpened his voice and his confidence. It was said that he stood out even then, small in size, but bursting with determination and sharp observation. During those early years, fate brought him face to face with Eddie Murphy, who was already a star. Murphy reportedly saw something special in the young comic, a spark of originality and courage. He later offered Chris a tiny part in Beverly Hills Cop 2. The role lasted only about 15 seconds, but it meant the world to Chris. It cracked open the door to Hollywood, a place that had long seemed unreachable to a kid from Brooklyn. That moment, brief as it was, became one of the stepping stones that led him toward his breakthrough. Everything changed in 1990 when Chris Rock joined Saturday Night Live. It was his first major platform, a dream come true, and also an enormous challenge. Over the next 3 years, he became one of the standout voices on the show, known for his sharp humor and bold opinions. While others stuck to safe, lighthearted sketches, Chris preferred to take risks. He spoke about race, inequality, and American hypocrisy with a mix of anger and wit that made people listen. His humor wasn't meant to comfort, it was meant to confront. Behind the laughter, though, he was said to wrestle with frustration. The network often tried to limit his creativity, pushing him towards safer material that fit their usual formula. But Chris had little interest in playing it safe. He believed comedy should reflect the truth, even when that truth was ugly. His SNL years taught him that fame could amplify his voice, but it could also cage it. Still, he never stopped speaking his mind. For someone who knew all too well the pain of being bullied, was Chris Rock intentionally mocking Jada Pinkett Smith's condition? Or did he simply fail to realize how hurtful his words might sound because of his nonverbal learning disorder? Was Will Smith truly wrong for reacting the way he did? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.